Okay, we will get started here. So, lesson two, we're in lesson two now. Basic photo corrections. I'm going to start off this lesson. There's a portion of this, of the chapter that I think is really important to understand, not just for this chapter, but for digital imaging in general. And that is understanding image size and resolution. So, we learned about from lesson one what resolution means, and it is the measurement of the pixels. How many pixels are within your image that you're working on? So resolution is a term that can mean different things. So if we're talking about, if we're going to print something, the pixels talk about the density of the pixels. How many pixels per inch? Right here. So for print means pixel density such as 300 pixels per inch. That generally is considered a high resolution image. For video, for example, a 4K video frame is the standard is 380 by 380, 3840 by 2160. So if you are getting into video production, those are going to be numbers that you are going to know really quick, because that is the resolution of a 4K, which now is pretty standard of resolution for video. In Photoshop, so if we look at this image that we're going to be working on today, which is a digital bitmap image. Bitmap images are made up of pixels. If we were to zoom in on this, we could see each of these square picture elements that when put together give us a continuous tone of an image. Photographs are more digital type of bitmap images than, say, logos. Logos are more, think of them as your coloring book with lines that have filled with color. Which is a vector graphic. So in Photoshop, the most common way to change pixels dimensions, we're going to do one of them today. Lesson 9 is another one we're going to actually do this a little bit more, is to use the crop tool or to go to image size and change the image size. Now, there's a few new tools in Photoshop that allow you to resample an image. And when I say resample an image, that means to add pixels that weren't there. So say, for example, you download something from the internet that isn't the correct pixel size. There's a way in Photoshop, it's not the best way, you're always better off going for the high resolution first to try to find something that's high resolution and not have to resample than to have Photoshop try to resample. You don't get the best results all the time. So you're always better off scanning something at high resolution or searching for something at high resolution or actually taking the image picture yourself. So to change the pixel density when using the crop tool, you're going to enter the resolution in the field. Now, a general rule of thumb, let's say today we're going to start with a 9 by 9 image. And a lot of times what happens is if you're in this field, a creative director will give you the specifications for each of the pictures that are going to be needed, say for a brochure, for a website, for a digital ad, for a postcard. And they'll tell you, like, the front cover has to be 7 by 11 at 300 ppi. If we're going to put this up on a website, those sizes are going to be different. So you have to supply the creative director back those images that they're requesting, right? So a lot of times they'll give you an image that isn't that size, but like we're going to do today, we have to crop it. A general rule of thumb, it's never a problem if you're going from large to small. Where it could start to become an issue if you're going from small to large, because one of the questions on lesson 1 quiz is a bitmap image has a finite number of pixels. True or false? True. There's only a certain amount of pixels within a bitmap image. So you could use the crop tool and enter a value, or when using image size, there's a resampling option that lets you enlarge. Not the best solution, but if that's all you got, it's better than nothing. So you might ask yourself, how do you know how many pixels are in an image? So a pixel, like we said, there's a finite number. So if you ever want to know, it's pretty simple. You're going to multiply the width and the height in pixels. So for example, in this lesson, we're going to crop an image to 2100 square pixels. So it's 7 by 7. So 2100 pixels will give us 4,410 pixels. That's how many pixels are in that image. Just kind of back from 5th grade geometry. If you want to know the area of a square or rectangle, multiply width times height. That gives us the area or the pixels. So 1 million pixels equals 1 megapixel. So they're about 4 megapixels. Pixel dimensions affect the size and download upload time. So you never want to upload something that's a high resolution onto a website because it's going to spin, right? It's just too large for that website to handle. So how do you know of an image's resolution in pixels per inch? So if you're given the size of an image, say 7 inches by 7 inches, and you're told that the pixels, or 2100, so you're going to multiply these two together, so 2100. So you're going to divide the 7 into the 2100, and that gives you 300 pixels per inch. That tells you the resolution. So if you know that the pixels width-wise is 2100, and you know that the size of that is 700 or 7 inches, you're just going to divide those two, and that gives you the resolution in pixels per inch. You're never really going to have to do that, to be quite honest, but it's good to know where you would find that, because most of the time you'll see it in Photoshop. It tells you exactly. But if you're not in Photoshop and you have these pixel numbers and inches numbers, that's how you would do it. So a question that you might have is, how much resolution is enough? So it all depends on the medium that you're using. For example, in video, if you're doing a 4K, it has to be this size. So if you're a video person that's working in Adobe Premiere, your source image for 4K has to be in this size, width times length. If you're doing a print job, for example, you have to have enough to give you a clear printed image, and that's the density of pixels. So if you want to fill 7 inches wide, the requirement for resolution is 300 ppi. That is an industry standard. Now, on a printer like this or a printer at home, they're not quite high resolution. You could probably get away with 250. So you have to have at least 2100 pixels wide. There has to be 2100 pixels wide of 7 inches across. So just remember those two kind of minimums. 3840 by 2160 for video, and 300 ppi at the size that you need it. The size meaning 7 inches. So you would need 2100 pixels wide for this piece if you wanted to print it. So how does physical reproduction size affect resolution? So changing an image, let me try to move this over. The reproduction size will affect the resolution because the same number of pixels now cover a small area. So that's what I was saying. If you expand the size without expanding the pixels, you're going to get something that is not a good quality. So, for example, if we have a 7-inch wide by 7-inch wide image and we want to change that to 14 inches wide, and if that 7-inch wide by 7-inch wide was 300 ppi or 2100 pixels across and down, and we bring it to 1400 or to 14, now that equals 150. Right? So let me just,
Isn't that kind of low?
which is low, which you couldn't send something in the printer. So if we have an image that's 7 inches by 7 inches and 300, and so this is 2100 on each side, and we're going to upscale this to 14 inches by 14 inches, and we're not going to change anything. That now becomes a 150 PPI image, right? So when you expand it, it becomes half of the size of what your pixels would need. Now, you can do this if, say, you're going to be putting it on, this is going to go on a big billboard or something that's far away, because you don't really need that close-up resolution. The resolution is based on how close you are. So if you're looking at a printed brochure, you're looking at it like this. If you're creating a billboard won't need 300 PPI resolution because you're looking at it far away. So the resolution, there's standards for billboards that are different from standards like a brochure, because your eyes don't need all of those. So you'd be surprised if you're up on a billboard and you look at it, you're like, wow, this is really pixelated. That's because your eyes will adjust as you're very far away. So it wouldn't work for a brochure, but it might work for something that's way up on a big sign. So just know that they're directly proportional. 7 times 2 is 14. So if we multiply this by 2, we have to divide that by 2. So they're directly proportional. One goes up, the other one has to come down. It's an important thing to kind of understand. So if we move over to this side here, let's see. Try to zoom this up so you can all see in the back. And that's kind of just what I explained. Does the image resolution always have to match the resolution of the printer display? So just know that sometimes if you were, printing on this is not a high resolution printer. This is kind of an office printer. It's not meant to print really high resolution. If I go to an offset printer, which is a printer that prints, they're not like they do digital printing, but they print on printing presses that have ink. It's not like toner that's coming out of a digital printer. It's actually ink that they squeeze out of a tube and put on plates, and it prints one plate at a time and puts color on top of color on top of color, and it has the smell of ink paint. If you've ever been into an offset printer, you can get a little high in there. It's like every time I've gone for a press check, and they're usually for large runs, like meaning large printing. So like if I have a brochure like this and I am going to mail it across the whole entire country, I'm going to probably produce like 100,000 prints of this, right? So I'm going to go to an offset printer. An offset printer might charge me per piece like $1 for this, 10-page brochure. If I was going to do a digital print of this, it'd probably be like $10, like 10 times more. But if I was only going to offset print 100 of these, it would be opposite. Like the smaller the quantity of these, the more expensive it is to print. So offset printing is for large print runs. They have very high, they print in ways that's very high resolution. So because the way you display it out in technologies, some printers will allow you to print from 200 to 360. So a 200 PPI on this printer would work. If you were to send a 200 PPI to an offset or high resolution digital printer, you probably wouldn't get a good result. So it all depends. Same with screen monitors. These monitors that we have here are high resolution screen monitors. A monitor, say, that you have on a cheap Dell computer won't have the same resolution on the screen. That's because these monitors were meant for a photo lab, right? So same with your phone. It all kind of depends. So if you go into this industry and somebody is designing for, just like in lesson 1, for something to go on a TV in a restaurant, if they have like rolling display ads, or if it's going to be on a phone, you have to ask the person who is giving you this job, or the creative director. They'll tell you what that resolution has to be. So all monitors are not the same, all printers are not the same. It really depends. So this printer, so if you were to open up something on this monitor, it might look much smaller than if you look at it 100% on this monitor than if you look at it at 100% on yours at home, because this has much more resolution. These monitors are very expensive. Like compared to just a normal monitor you can buy at Costco, these are much, much more expensive because they're high resolution monitors. They let you see much more specific detail. So when considering high resolution, so for images reproduced on screens, one way to currently define high resolution is when an image has enough pixels to fill the whole window. So that's usually what you're going after. For print, the image has to be 240 to 360. That's high resolution at the actual size. And what I mean by actual size is if you're printing out a 7-inch by 7-inch photo, that's actual size. If I have a 3.5 by 3.5 at 300, that's not the size I want, right? I need this double, so this would only be 150. So it has to be that resolution at the size that you want it to be output at. So just because it says 300 doesn't mean it's a high resolution size for the size that you're going to need it. That's kind of what that does. So does changing resolution affect the storage size? Yes, it does. But you can make something larger. These two are going to have the exact same number of pixels. This one, the 7 by 7 at 300, will have the exact same number of pixels at this one. So will 3.5, 3.5 at 600. All of these have the exact same number of pixels. The only time the pixels will change is if this number is increased. So if I want to output this and resample this in Photoshop, so I have a 14 by 14 inch poster, and I want to bring this to 300, then yes, the storage size is going to change. But if the pixel dimensions all stay the same, then the size when you look at it in your finder, like of the size it'll show all the same size. So just know the only time the physical size of the file changes is when the resolution changes. So this little section in the book is a really important section to understand. Now, one of our SLOs, or student learning outcomes, is to understand resolution and how it's applied. So at the end of the semester, the state sends me a questionnaire with each of your names on it, and I have to assess each of you by your work throughout the year of whether you understand this or not. So just know it's one of the basic principles in digital imaging is understanding resolution and image size. Any questions on this? There's a few questions on the quiz on this, but it's just something that you should understand. Okay, with that said, let's bust into the actual exercise itself. I just wanted to get through that before we begin. Probably take us 2 classes to get through this. We'll see. So if we look at this image, we can see that it has been scanned, and it hasn't been scanned on the scanner, so it's straight. So we can see it's a little bit crooked. If we were to zoom up on this, let's kind of zoom up really large, and I'm going to put some of these. I'm not going to need my text. I might need my adjustments, and there is my properties. So if we zoom up on this, let's just look at some of the things that are wrong with it. So there's this little scratch here within the image. I'm holding down my space bar, and this is what I do when I get images that are going to go into a brochure, or someone's making a family photo album and they're asking me to retouch the photos. I zoom up very large because I'm retouching. I charge $100 an hour to retouch photos, just something that's kind of standard. For my design charges, I charge like anywhere from $150 to $200 an hour to design. So this is more retouching. If I'm going to give this off to somebody, they're going to probably charge me the same amount, anywhere from $75 to $100 to retouch photos. So it's a pretty good business to get into if that's what you like to do. So retouching is getting rid of any of like these little kind of specks or scratches. If I'm retouching a photo for portraits or a wedding photographer, say a wedding photographer just has time to go on the photo shoots and get new sales and do marketing, and she or he doesn't have time to do all the retouching. They give it to somebody else or somebody that works for them. But you have to be very precise. So this is a really important part of Photoshop. So if we look at this, here's another like really large crease. We could see all of these other kind of spots here that need to be retouched and taken out. So I just kind of zoomed up on those. When you look at it this way, they're very difficult to see. So that's why in lesson 1 we learned how to use the zoom tool, because you really need that zoom tool to make those retouching fixes happen. So the first thing that we want to do, the book asks us to do, is to straighten this and to bring it into the right size and resolution. So anytime, and it's kind of, I'm going to bring this part way up to the top just so you can see. In the bottom left-hand corner, we can see what the dimensions and the resolution of our image is. So it tells us it's 9 by 9 at 240 pixels. 9 by 9 and 240. If you don't see that, then you could just click on the little arrow and come to document dimensions. That's one way that you can do it. I'm going to expand this back down. Another way you can do it is to come to image, image size, and look at the actual pixel dimensions. So resolution, size, 9 by 9. Now, when I talked about resampling before, this is where the two ways that you can resample an image. So if I wanted this to be 9 by 9, but I wanted it to be 300 to have a really nice resolution, I would choose either of these preserve details enlargement or bicubic smoother. Those are the two choices that Photoshop gives you to resample or upsample an image. If you were just to do it on automatic and put the numbers in there, it gives you more just by making the size dimensions larger. So those are the two ways, and we're going to learn how to do that a little bit more precisely in lesson 9 with advanced compositing. But I just thought I would give you that piece of knowledge now. So it's always a good thing to check to see what size your image is. So the first thing that they want us to do is to straighten this, and we'll call him the creative director, says that they are going to need this at 7 by 7 at 300 ppi. Now, because we're going down in size, and this was already 240, we'll be fine to bring this to 300 because it's smaller. If they would have said to go larger, we'd have to resample this image. But we're going smaller, so we'll be fine. Another thing you can kind of do while we're in the image size is just be aware of the physical size. So this image is 13.3 megabytes in storage space. We're going to compare this after we make our cropping and resize it correctly. So the first thing that we want to do is straighten this image. The crop tool allows us to straighten. Just like in your phone, when you go to the edit, there's rotate and straighten. That'll allow us to straighten this image. We already know where the crop tool is because we used it in lesson 3. If you have your double-sided toolbox, it's the third tool down. So it trims or expands the edges of an image. If you're ever curious, hit the learn more. So with this, notice our options. Our options for each tool are in the options bar. That's a question on lesson 1. There's a little option that's called straighten at the top. It looks like a little ruler. When you choose that, the cursor becomes that little ruler. How you straighten something is you click, hold, and drag whatever is out of alignment. I'm not going to go straight across, but I'm going to follow the edge of this blue line to straighten it. So I'm going to click on the corner, hold, and drag. Right? So I'm going to go in the line that is incorrect, and it automatically will fit that into the crop box. Now, I know that I am in the crop tool because the crop tool has, they call it a shield, right? So we saw this in lesson 3 what the shield means. So anything that's on the outside of this is not the correct or is not in that. So we can say, yes, crop that, the checkbox and make that straight. So we've got this straight piece. So it's still 9 by 9 at 240. The next thing that we want to do is make this the right size of 7 by 7 at 300 ppi. Now, last week I had said when we were cropping for the lesson 3 that ratio just will allow you to freely crop that left to right, top to bottom without any sort of constraints. The ratio is within our options bar. There's a bunch of preset options that we could choose from. There's one that's the second one that gives us very specifics, width, height, resolution. So if I click on width, height, resolution, there's one that's in there of 8 by 8 at 200 ppi. I may have used that before when I was creating something, but it'll always go back to the last one that you chose. So you want to make sure that this is in inches. If it's not, you can type in space IN. If you see that it's in pixels, you can make sure that you change your bar back to inches by right-clicking in your ruler. So you can't do it now because I'm in the crop, but you can do that. But if it's not, if it's in pixels, you can just do 7 space type IN in Photoshop will know. So width, height, resolution, 7 by 7 at 300. All right, so wherever I'm going to crop to is going to be that size. So what I'm going to do is I want to crop so I don't see anything that is white. I don't want to see any of the white. Now, what's going to happen is, oops, it's 7 by 8. I want it 7 by 7. Yeah, 7 by 7. So anything that is outside of this crop shield is going to get cut off. So I'm going to see how far I can expand that. But because it's square, I should get most everything, right? Because I'm going from a square to a square. So I want to make sure that everything inside of my shield I can see. Anything on the outside is going to be cropped out. I've got this little delete cropped pixels checked in my options bar. If that is not checked, it's still going to keep those pixels on the outside of your canvas. So they're still there. I like getting rid of them just because I don't want anything to be confusing where someone could kind of move those pixels in. In order to make a crop happen, you have to give the check or return or enter on your, it might take 2, on your keyboard. Now let's go back to image size, and there it is, 7 by 7 at 300. Notice the last one was 13.3 megabytes. So we haven't, the size of this is actually smaller. So we have a 300 ppi image worthy to print at the correct size, and it's actually just a teeny bit smaller. That's because we went down 2 inches in size. So we know that this is the correct size, that we're going to need for our output. Just going to click OK. Any questions on how I got this far? Everyone clear on that? All right, so the next thing that we want to do, let's see, what time do I say we're going to go to 1:45? Okay, we'll be able to get through a lot of this, is we want to change the tonal value of this. What tone do you think is predominant in this image?
Yellow.
Yellow. It's kind of yellowy, right? So we don't want that yellow tone. So sometimes, even if it's a newer picture, say if it's a warm sunny day or you have, you're in a room with a pink neon light or the coloring of the lights is kind of off and you want it to look more natural than that kind of color tone, you might want to adjust those colors. So we're going to do this by using an adjustment layer. So the adjustment panel is under window adjustments. You can see all of the panels that you have open. So I've got adjustments, layers. I thought I had properties open. I think I do, but I'm not sure why it's not even on. Maybe it's not part of that. I even have my contextual taskbar open here at the bottom. So Our adjustments are things like brightness and contrast, levels, curves, hue and saturation. There's something that is very specific to one layer. It's not an overall of all the layers, although you can, but it's just to that one layer. Today we're going to use the adjustments of curves. So once I choose curves, we don't really have to be so worried about the technical part of this histogram because we're going to use something that's called the white point. Has anyone ever heard of that term if you're a photography person? The white point. If you've ever seen a photographer, and sometimes they'll have a little meter and they're measuring the light in the room, they're looking for white light, like what's white. Tell them through this little meter. And that's kind of what we're doing. We're looking for what is white. When we tell Photoshop what is white, Photoshop will determine the proper colors for everything else. So anything white that we're going to choose that's white still has that yellow kind of hue to it, tone to it. But Photoshop will take that as what's white and make everything the correct color. Now, if we look to the side here, we've got these three eyedroppers. One is for white, one is for gray, and one is for black. We're going to use white. So sample in image to set white point. Oops, kind of went away. Let's see if I can get it back up again. To set the white point. You can also press Option to display the clipping. All we need to do once we have selected this, and you can tell that it'll be dark. Oops, I don't want this one to be selected. I'm just going to close this, and I'm going to open it up again. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So all you have to do is click on that one point, the white point tool, the eyedropper tool, and choose something here that's white. Anyone want to guess or take a first shot of what we think is white?
The little girl's shirt.
The little girl's shirt. Right, exactly. The little boys, whether this is a boy or girl. So I like to kind of zoom up a little bit on this, not so much. And then with that white point tool, I'm just going to click on her shirt. Simple as that. Now, this white point tool, you can keep clicking and choose what you like. So if I want to try the white on this or the white on her shirt, back of the shirt here, maybe on the Ponte Vecchio Bridge here in Florence. So you can keep choosing anywhere you want, and when you find the one that you like, you can settle on that.
So that's changing the tone.
That's changing the tone. So that's how you can correct the tonal range of an image. Very easy. And you can see that when you do that, it changes within the histogram. Right? So you didn't really have to do anything with this yet. We're going to do this a little later in the semester where we're going to deal with curves. But for now, we're going to use the curves adjustment to correct the tonal range of that piece. When you look at your layers here, notice that these curves, the adjustment layers, are non-destructive. Now, it gets a little confusing once you start doing a few more things, and the book tells us to actually flatten the image, and you can. These are the times I always tell you don't flatten the image, but I'll be able to tell if you've applied this modification just by looking at this, that you have done that color correction. So I don't need to see the adjustment layers there. So the book tells you to go ahead and flatten the image. And that's just so when we're going to make some of our other corrections here, that'll be easy. So to flatten an image, that means to take all of the layers and condense them down into one, right? So we're going to come to the Layers panel Options menu. That's the little hamburger up in the top right-hand corner. So flatten image, let's see where this is. It's usually, why am I not seeing it?
It's on the top.
Was it on the top? I kind of missed it. Oh, there it is right there. Sometimes different things changes. So flatten image, and now it asks you because you don't want to do it if you don't want to do it. And so now it's all into one. So now we're ready to start to make some of the edits. Now this is where you have to determine whether your system as you're logged on. Now, if you have the subscription on your own, these will work. If you don't, I'm not 100% certain yet if the school has updated the subscription for Photoshop. They were talking about it. I don't know if they were actually going to do it. But let's start some retouching. I'm going to show you first the way without using the AI tool and the way with. They're very, very similar. The tools that are listed underneath this little Band-Aid are our healing tools. So it kind of makes sense that it's a Band-Aid. The first one is the spot healing brush. That's one of the easiest tools to use because you do not need a source, meaning you don't have to say, heal it according to here. It's just a click, hold, and drag. One of the newer tools, the newest tool that Photoshop has added to this is called the remove tool. It looks very similar to the spot healing brush, but they have that little, the little AI sign or the little AI symbol kind of looks like this. Whenever you see these symbols like this that are kind of like these diamonds next to each other, that's kind of like a symbol that it's dealing with AI. So let's first start the spot healing brush, and then we'll go back and try the remove tool. They both do the same type of thing. The remove tool just uses AI. So the first thing is this really big line that comes right down the center. That's where the image was folded, the picture was folded. The spot healing brush is a brush, right? So it goes large or small. We all know how to make the brush larger or smaller, right, with that bracket. Now, one thing that we want to look at is, do we want it to be normal, replace, multiply? I would like just to start with normal. Content aware will heal it according to the pixels that are around it. Create texture, proximity match. I always stick with content aware because that always makes sense. So it's going to look for the pixels around it. So with this, all we're going to do is click, hold, and drag right down that crease. And as we release, it's gone. Okay, that's without any type of AI. So if you don't have AI on your computer, that's how you're going to get rid of it. Let's even look at some of these other ones. So if I zoom up on this, we've got all those scratches there. I'm just going to, now with this, that's too big of a brush, right? So I'm just going to click, hold, and drag. And this is a way that I can quickly start to retouch this image, is just to get rid of them that way. Click, hold, and drag. Now, let me come back up to my history panel. And there's my history panel down here. And I am going to, shows me, here's all the things that I just did with my spot healing brush. I'm going to come back up to where I flattened that image, right? And now let's just bring it back to fit to window. So I'm still back to where we started from. The remove tool is very similar where you're going to click, hold, and drag. Now, one of the things, there's a few options that you want to make sure, or that I like to have on. Remove after each stroke is one of them. So that means whenever you click, hold, and drag, release the mouse, it's going to remove after each stroke, as opposed to doing all of them and hitting the checkbox, or the check mark up in your options, or return. That's just something that I like. Generative AI on or off. I always will put it on just because that's what we're dealing with. I'm trying to see if the book tells us one way or the other, but I'll just start with it on, or may use generative AI. It doesn't really matter, but I always just keep it on. Again, this is a brush as well, so you want to make sure that you choose the proper brush size. You don't want to have it be really large if you have something small you're trying to heal. So I'm just going to go click, hold, and drag, and come right down. Now this one isn't that great, but it's pink. And it takes generative AI a little bit longer, and you can see that it does the same thing, right? So I could zoom up on this again. And if I want to do this and just, Again, make my brush a little bit smaller with the left bracket, and I'm just going to click once. Click along here. You can see it takes a little bit more processing power, but to me, it does the same thing. So if you don't have the AI capabilities, not a big deal. Your spot healing brush will work just as well. Let's come over to this really big scratch in the corner here and just try to brush over this whole area here and see what it gives us. Boom, right? So that's a really good way to heal something fast. Spot healing brush or the replace tool. Say you take a picture of somebody, a portrait picture, and they've got a little blemish that day. Want to get rid of the blemish. There's a hair in their face. There was a piece of lint in their mustache. Or sounds crazy, but things like that happen. Their lip is a little chapped here, and you want to regenerate their lip. They have a little cold sore, or any of those things. These are the tools that will do that. If you find someone that wants to look a little bit younger and they woke up that day with big bags under their eyes, or they smiled so hard that they have they're called crow's feet, those little lines on each side of your eyes. You can get rid of those with these two tools. So you can make somebody look a little bit younger, give them kind of a little facelift. If somebody is smiling and they got the forehead, or I call them the twin towers, those two little lines that are right here if you furrow your brow. You can get rid of all of those with these two tools. So if you're trying to make somebody look younger, these are the tools that you can do it with. If someone has a scar on their face and they don't want that scar, this is the tool that you can get rid of those. If you have an oil stain on your driveway and you're taking pictures of your house, you want to get rid of that, this is the tool. Spot healing brush and replacement tool. It's a point and click. Now, there are other tools that we're going to look at, and I'll show you in a second, that need a source. They say you got to get your source from here in order to place it over here. That is the clone stamp tool. We're cloning pixels from one place to another. Any question on that spot healing brush or remove tool? Okay, so now we're going to go. We'll just do one more thing and then we'll finish the rest because I've kind of gone over my time. I'm going to show you the two ways again, with and without AI, just in case you don't have the AI. So we want to get rid of this Joe Schmo here, no offense to Joe, or Jose in the back, and get him out. He doesn't belong to us. Somehow he got on the Ponte Vecchio while we were here in Florence, and we want to get him out. So he's not part of our family. So we first, in order to get rid of him, we have to make a selection. So we just finished our selection chapter. So who can recommend a way to select this guy that's on the bridge? I heard someone say it. Who said that? Was that you, Fernando? The object selection tool. You could also do it with the lasso tool if you wanted to lasso around him. But the object selection tool would be the easiest one. One thing we want to make sure, though, with something like this is that we catch his shadow, because the shadow might be left. So as we take that object selection tool, again, we're doing selecting people. It's up at the top. So we're going to click, hold, and drag outside so we get all of him that's there. All right? So you can see that's a pretty good selection for him. Now I'm going to use the generative AI in the remove tool. And let's see, I want to make sure that I do this absolutely correctly. Now, I don't have to hover over it with the remove tool. This at the bottom is called the taskbar, right? And I think you can move it around. I kind of want to move it around to the top. So in the book, they tell us with the taskbar. If you don't see that taskbar, the contextual taskbar, you can click it on or off under Windows to the bottom, just like how you would turn your tools on or off. So with that taskbar, With the generative fill, there's also something that says remove. So all you have to do is click on the generative fill, and let's see, it should. Maybe you have to hit remove. I don't use this very often. There we go. And it removes them. Now, if we look, I believe it's in, I want to make sure that I see. There is a way, I thought that it put it in the properties. See view more. No. Usually, for some reason, maybe when you did, I already did it today, we'll show you 3 different options of them doing that. But that is pretty darn good to get rid of that guy. It filled it in. Now you can kind of see a little bit of weirdness, but that's pretty good. I'm going to do a Command Z to undo that.
So if this is a flat from one image, how did he get the pixels behind him?
That's what AI does. It's looking at all these other pixels and it's trying to figure that out. Like that's what the AI does. That's what's like it's showing when it was it's taking these pixels and it's just computing it. That's what's like.
I would understand different layers.
The beauty, no, it's just looking around and saying, okay, I'm going to regenerate this, and I'm going to regenerate it according to this bridge, according to this wall, according to this building, according to the water here, which is pretty darn amazing. Like when I first started Photoshop like 30 years ago, that would take you a half a day. Using the clone stamp tool, you might have to bring other images, and it seriously would. Or you would figure out another way to do it. Now, if you don't have this, or the generative AI does something weird that you can't get, another tool that is very similar, not half as powerful, not half as good, is called the patch tool. I'm going to zoom up on this just so you can kind of see what's happening on the patch tool. Again, I'm going to put my space bar down. So the patch tool looks like kind of a little patch. It's like a thing that looks like a little patch. Again, I like to look at the top, content aware. That's telling me that it's going to take the pixels that are around this and try to fill it in with those. There's one other option that's called structure. Structure goes from 1 to 7. It goes 4 in the middle as the default because it's the middle. So 7 will absolutely follow every piece that you visually see. 1 is kind of a little looser. 4 is the center of that. So if you find that something doesn't look quite right, you can play around with the structure. There's not a lot of options. It's only 1 to 7. So if it doesn't work, then I might go down to 3 or go up to 5 and see what happens. So how this works is you're going to click inside of this, hold and drag. I'm dragging to the left. Now notice as I drag up and down, I don't want to go too far up. I want to kind of keep that bridge the same and kind of like a lot of these that look the same. But you can see that it kind of looks like my building in the back kind of shifts a little. So if I were to try to get that to fit right, then the bridge shifts a little. So I kind of have to make up my decision. That's why I'm saying it's not half as good, right? So when I do this and I deselect, you can kind of see that some of it got mixed in with this. So what I could do with that is do Command Z and Command Z, and now maybe I'm going to change my structure and bring this down to 2. Let's see if that makes it any better. I'm going to deselect. That looks even worse. So Command Z, Command Z. So maybe I'll bring my structure up to 5 or 6. I might even have to take a bigger selection and select more around him instead of just so tight to him. So these are all things that I might have to try. That's why I was saying it's not as good of a process. So I'm going to, instead of use this selection, I'm going to go and do a total another selection. Not everything works on the first time, and you'll disappoint yourself if you think that it does. So I'm going to take a little bit more. Instead of following him really close, I'm going to take the tact of going just a little bit farther around him. I'm just using my lasso tool just to try to get more of a not so close to him. Now I'm going to try the same thing again with the patch tool and see if I can get a better result. Okay, and now release, Command D. That worked a little bit better. You don't kind of see it around him, but there's still a lot of healing that I have to do. So, with the sake of learning one or two more tools, I'll take 5 more minutes just to show you a few more tools that are in our toolbox that we can do. Anytime you see these kind of double kind of things, that's telling you that something has been retouched. So you always want to try to get rid of any of those double things. So I am going to use what's called the clone stamp tool. And the clone stamp tool looks like, it's also called a rubber stamp. So you guys might be too young to know what rubber stamps were used, but when I was a kid, like you'd go to the library and the librarian had like a rubber stamp with the date. She would put it on an ink pad and then stamp the card that said September 25th is when it was due. Or if you want to pay a bill in person, and they would get a rubber stamp that said paid, and they would mark that paid. So the rubber stamp would get the ink and transfer it onto the paper. Same kind of metaphor. So the rubber stamp is one clone stamp that needs a source, needs to say, where is my ink? So in order to do that, and it's a brush, so we don't want this to be very large. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. And anytime you're doing the clone stamp tool, you want to choose your source close to where you're healing. If I want to heal this area, I'm not going to choose over on this side, right? I'm going to choose close to where I need it. So if I want to choose, like, say, maybe here, the way that you get that ink is by holding down your Option key. When you hold down your Option key, your cursor changes to like a little bullseye. Then you just have to click, right? And right now I have aligned, which means that it's going to follow me as I go. So all I have to do, now notice that when I click, a little plus sign comes up, right? That plus sign, because I have aligned selected in my options bar, is going to follow me everywhere I go, right? So I'm just doing here. Now, if I want to choose another source like here, and I want to get rid of all of that, what it's doing is it's using pixels from this area, copying them and pasting them. So this is one that I use again too. If I have a big patch of grass that's yellow and the rest of it's green, and I want to copy close by grass, because grass is something you can't really distinguish blades from each other. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to click right here, and then I'm just going to click, 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 and kind of heal that with this clone stamp tool. Works really good for clouds in the sky or anything like that. Now, I can kind of do the same right here. If I want to extend this to maybe look double and try to fix this, maybe I want to extend that little piece at the bottom. So I'm going to clone stamp this here and just click along the bottom. And then I'm going to figure out a little bit later what to use at the top. You can also just click, hold, and drag, right? Option, click, hold, and drag. So with this, again, we're looking at it really high. Somebody might not notice that. So if I come back to double click on the zoom tool or the hand tool, you might not really notice that there's two things there. It might not be that big of a deal. So as the editor, you have to decide, how close you want that to work. But the clone stamp tool just copies pixels from one area to the next. Another healing tool that you can use if that generative AI fill didn't work. I'm going to leave it right there. Is there any questions on the spot healing brush, the generative fill, the patch tool, the clone stamp tool that I went over, or the curves?
If you clone the in between the two the kits, there's the rock look. Yeah, exactly. If you clone that and put it on where the kit is,
like right over here. Yeah.
That also masks more, because then
what it's going to do is, Joe asked, if you want this bottom to look more like that bottom, yeah. So if I want this to kind of come over in this area, then I can do that. So again, you have to choose a source, and maybe I'm going to make my brush just a little bit bigger, and then I have to hit Option. Okay, so now if I'm gonna come over here, I'm just gonna start to clone that, and notice that as I'm going up, that little option bar is going up. So if I need to option here, and then come back here, do the same thing.
It's like superimposing.
You're just painting with pixels. Think of it as painting with pixels, but it becomes a stamp. So now if that got a little bit on the bottom part here, I'm going to option click here and get rid of that little spot that I left there, right? So it's just taking pixels from one area and painting with them over here. So this would be a really hard thing to try to replicate unless you're actually replicating the exact pixels. So that's a good question, yeah.
Does that increases this size of the file?
No, because we still have the same amount of pixels. Now, layers will increase the size of the file. So if you have a file with many different layers that it has to remember, that's why if I always will output, so if I'm outputting to the printer, if I'm outputting to the web designer, I save my Photoshop file. So how I always work, if you look at my, like if I have a project file, I will have my PSD file. So my PSD file is my edit file. To the printer, I'm going to output a PDF file. And I'm not going to save it to the printer with the layers because I don't want them to edit it. So it's going to be a PDF flat. To my web designer, I'm going to save this as a JPEG. This automatically is flat. So I've got all of these different files. Now this size of this JPEG is going to probably be about 100 PPI. This is going to be 300 PPI. This is going to be whatever I have, and it'll probably be at a high resolution. So my files, I have all these different file formats for different applications. So it kind of depends. So this Photoshop file is going to be the largest in size because it's a Photoshop file than anything else. That's a good question. Any other questions?
Clear as mud.
Clear as mud. So that gives you another hour of lab to work on any of the assignments or your quiz. Get my attention if you need any help or if you want me to look at anything you're working on. If you can't quite get a selection for the next project or you need help on the quiz, just get my attention. Like I said, with quiz, you can definitely collaborate with anyone else within the class. That is perfectly fine. You just want me to come over? Okay, gotcha. All right, have a great weekend. We'll see you back on Monday.